here. Figure out who this is. See who that is. Okay. Welcome, first of all, to this course on Data Studio for educators and school leaders. My name is Chris Smith. I am currently working in Singapore. I work at Singapore American School. I've been in education for over 20 years. My background is in data visualization. I was a classroom teacher for 17 years, mainly in the elementary school. And I've been overseas for pretty much my entire educational career. I started off in Tokyo, and I lived there for a really long time. And so I'm fortunate enough to be bilingual in English and Japanese. You could probably tell by my looks. I've got a few years under my belt. I've got 2 kids in high school, and so interesting. Joe, I saw Joseph, some of the data that you put up about. I saw your scattergrams there. That was pretty cool. I'm like, yeah, I'm in the middle of that right now with college stuff. And I when I'm not in front of a screen, I'm usually out on my bike, riding in the jungle here in Singapore, but mountain biking has been a passion of mine for ever since I was a high schooler myself. So a little bit about me. If you do want to reach out and contact me, I'm fairly responsive. If you email, whether you email to this account, whether you send something on Google Classroom, you put something in a Hangout, you hit me up on Twitter, I'm pretty quick to respond. So if you have an issue, if you have a question, if you want to share something, if you need some support on something, contact me however, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So something to keep in mind as we go through these 6 weeks, when you're working on things, as you're working on your own projects and time permits, if you want to have like a one-on-one session because you want to talk about something that you're doing and you need a sounding board, or you want to brainstorm, or you need some advice, I'm more than happy to do that. As long as we can set up a time, I'm totally cool with that. So just keep that in mind. And so with that, let me talk about a few of the expectations over this the course. Very simple. When you're here as much as possible, I know we're all busy. I know we have other things going on in our lives. So if you need to pop out, you need to go do something else. If you need to step out early, I've got pretty thick skin, don't worry. But while you're here, please be present. Also be kind. We got a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. Some people it's late at night, some people it's midday, some people it's super early in the morning. So just be aware of that and be kind, and then be engaged. I don't want this to be a one-way street. I am facilitating this session. I'm leading out based on what I know and my experience, but I know all of you also have a lot of experience, and you are you know a lot of things, and so I'm hoping this is a two-way street, and we're here to help each other out as I facilitate this group. So yeah, just a reiteration, lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds. I was really excited to see the form. Thank you for filling out the form. That gives me an idea of who's here, what your background is, what you're dealing with on the everyday, and then what you're looking for in this course. And so based on that, then I'll make modifications to things as we go. Remember, nothing is really set in stone. I have a plan, of course, but depending on the needs of the people in the group, we can shift and pivot and do whatever meets your needs. So don't be shy to ask questions, stop me, whatever. I'm totally cool with that. We're also going to assume confidentiality. Sometimes it might be hard to, if you want feedback on something or you're going to share something, and you might need to share some data that is kind of hard to sample or make private. So just bear in mind that if somebody is sharing something, it could be confidential. So we're just going to respect that. A little bit about what's happening today. So we're going to start off. I usually do a bit of a story, kind of talk to you, give you a scenario. So we're going to talk a little bit today about this journey of creating a culture of data in school. I'll talk a little bit more specifically about why Data Studio over, say, Tableau or Click or some other software programs. We'll take a quick look at some data. Actually, we'll be looking at the data that you guys submitted. And then through that, we'll have a bit of a discussion in some breakout rooms. We'll jump in and build a dashboard real quick with that, and then we'll wrap up. At any time, you are more than welcome to interrupt me if you have a question or you need me to stop. So please don't think that like you need to wait for me to pause. So getting into this story, this big idea, like why are we using data? Why are we collecting data? Why are we here? This is something that kind of has been on my mind, and I wonder why we do this. And probably a lot of people ask why we're doing this. And so throughout this course, we're going to talk about that a lot, why we're doing the things that we're doing. The big idea that I think about data and why we collect data and why we're using data is to inform people about what's going on. We are trying to make sure that we're having productive conversations when we meet with people. We're also trying to support decision making. That's why we're collecting data. And we're also trying to identify areas for improvement and set goals, especially within our schools. So so one way that sorry, my slides are bouncing around, that I kind of summarize this is we use data to efficiently make informed decisions to improve learning for all students. So when somebody asks me, why are we doing this? That's kind of what I come back down to. It comes down to the students, especially in schools, where we're working towards improving learning for all of our students. So in order to do that, we need to make sure that one of the biggest things is to make sure that data is accessible. And what I mean by accessible I don't mean just like unlocking permissions on a spreadsheet or something like that. Accessible means that data is able to be understood, and that the people that need the data are able to use it. And so if we can provide access to data, then that allows people to look at the data and gain insights, and that should lead those insights to action. So that's the main thing. So data and building a dashboard and making a chart shouldn't be the end goal. That's not the final product. That should actually be the starting point. And so our jobs is to prepare the data, the information that we collect, and put it into a format that is easily digestible and is made so that other people can be going on and making informed decisions. Something else that I will also do every session, I'm going to introduce you to someone that either is a colleague of mine or a mentor of mine, and that has kind of helped me out on this journey. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Stephanie Evergreen. Stephanie Evergreen is, she's based out of, I want to say she's in Michigan now, Kalamazoo. And she has a company called Evergreen Data. And she has some online stuff, really awesome online stuff, Evergreen Data Academy. She was one of the first people that kind of helped me out and mentored me along as I was getting started. And so if you have an opportunity to look at her stuff, I highly suggest you check it out. But her big idea here is that she's saying people in any industry use data to improve programs and services to make a bigger impact on the world. So that's her why, and why we use data. So I like that quote from her. And just if you're wondering what she does, she works with kind of big people now. Like she makes graphs and charts for the CDC and for MPOs, and so some of the things that Anthony Fauci, if you're familiar with the what's going on in the States and the COVID, she kind of played a part in helping prepare some data for him. So that's kind of cool. So this whole idea about building a culture. A data culture in schools. I want to talk to you a little bit about the journey that we went on at SAS, and I'll try to speed through this. This is usually like a 2-hour presentation. I'm going to try to cram it into a very short timeline here. So one thing that we do as a school, we've gone through different stages in our process of creating a data culture, and as I kind of hit on these, you might think about, well, where are you at? Where is your school at? Where would you like to be? And this might help you, give you an idea of maybe where you want to go next. So starting out, this whole data thing, at this stage, a lot of schools are like aware that they should be collecting data, and they're like, well, we know we should collect data. We're not exactly sure what to collect or where we're going to put it or anything like that. So let's just start collecting data. And there's very little rhyme or reason to what they're doing. And so if that happens to be the situation, then the solution, at least that we came to, was we are going to take a look at, okay, well, what are we going to collect? How are we going to record this? Where are we going to, what's it going to look like? What are we going to ask our teachers to input? Is it going to be numbers? Is it going to be anecdotal notes? What's it going to be? And then where are we going to store this? How are we going to organize this and store this? So those are some of the three things that we needed to set up structures in order to move forward in our school. And then, so we're getting organized. Now we have this situation with rogue data. So schools are collecting the data, but they might be collecting it in different ways. And so they know what they're collecting, but they're not really clear on the how and the why. And so this kind of leads to rogue data. I don't know if in your schools, if this happens, but you set up a system where you provide something and then teachers kind of do their own thing. They're like, well, that doesn't work for me. I'm just going to do my own thing. And so they have a spreadsheet, their own thing, or they got Post-it notes or whatever it is. But they kind of start doing their own systems. And because of that, you lose the alignment with your data. So what do we do about that? If that happens to be the situation, we're collecting this data, but teachers are like, well, why are we even doing this? So what we did was to increase data literacy, and we did that through guided PD sessions. We talked about, why we're using the data, what we do to collect it, what does it mean? We looked at data that we're collecting, internal assessments, external assessments, those types of things. And we also tightened up our internal assessments. So we wanted to make sure that we had good calibration of what we were collecting internally. So for example, we use rubrics for our writing, assessing writing. And so it's like, okay, we score on a 1, 2, or a 3. And like, does everybody have an understanding and agree? What is a 3? What is a 2? Does it mean the same thing across the grade level? Does it mean the same thing from one grade level to the next? So just calibrating and aligning and tightening up those internal assessments was something that we spent a lot of time with. And then finally, we provided release time for teachers. So we know teachers are super busy. They've got enough things to do. And we wanted to make sure that in order for them to really buy into what we were hoping to do, we gave them release time. So we gave them time away from the classroom that was dedicated to, so they could focus on this and they didn't have to, jam it in during lunch or after school or something like that. So, okay, so we know the what, we know the how, but still some teachers are wondering what's the why? Why are we doing this? So we've got this data, we're putting it here, so what? So in order to address that issue of the why, we continued to build our data literacy. What we did was to tighten things up. We also provided templates for the teachers to input data. We said, this is how we're going to be collecting our data. This is where we're going to be collecting our data. We've already had agreements on alignment, vertical and horizontal alignment. And so this is where you can put your data. And so we provided that for them to kind of get rid of the rogue data. We also increased our teacher learning around data. So we moved towards these things in our school called data days. Some might refer to them as like a learning retreat or student data chats or data conversations. And I know this is happening a lot in school districts in the States as well, but we set aside dedicated time, more increased dedicated time to focus specifically on the data that was being collected so that the teachers could look at it and analyze it and use that to help start making decisions moving forward. And we also, we have PLCs in our school. And so we used our PLC times, and we have, if you're familiar with Solution Tree and their PLC model, the question 3 and question 4, which is how do we respond when students don't learn it? And how can we extend and enrich students that already got it? We use those as our focal points for continuing discussions around the data. And so we scaffold structures for these questions in our PLCs, and then they could use that moving forward. So we moved now into this kind of innovation stage. So So we know the work that we're doing is great. We know why we're doing it. However, like with spreadsheets, we've got internal assessment data on spreadsheets and, little numbers and boxes, and some of them are pretty colors and all those kinds of things. And then we've also got external data from whether it be map assessment data or iReady data or Ames Web or some other third-party assessment tool. And so teachers are having to, at this point in time, what they were having to do is triangulate that data independently. They were having to pull data from multiple sources and try to make sense of it all. And so we thought the teachers understood the value of it, but their problem was, well, this takes forever to do it. So the solution to that of taking forever was, well, let's take a look at how can we build some dynamic exploratory dashboards. And so what we mean by exploratory is that the teachers are able to use the dashboards, are able to interact with the dashboards and find the answer to their questions. So it was our job to collate the data, bring it together in one place, and put it into a format that made sense for the teacher so that they could use it to make informed decisions. And by doing this and building a dashboard, what we realized was that we went from a situation where a teacher was getting, or a team was getting a half a day of release time for these data days. And before dashboards, they were spending roughly 75% of their time just counting numbers, like how many kids are at a level O in reading and how many kids are scoring above an 85% in their math assessments. And they were just doing calculations for 2.5 hours. And then they only had like a half hour left to actually make some action plans. And by the time that came around, they were too tired and they didn't want to really do anything. I was also a part of that when I was in the classroom. So I remember it very, very well. So when I moved into my role and got out of the classroom, having the background of what it was like as a teacher and what the teacher had to go through, I worked towards building these dashboards. And after we continued our PD on how to use the dashboards, we taught the teachers how to use them, what they mean, how to answer their questions. There was quite a significant shift. We ended up going from using 2.5 hours or so for analyzing data down to about 20 minutes. So teachers were spending anywhere from maybe 20, 25 minutes at first to answer their questions. And they were spending the rest of the time to actually develop action plans. And so they were making their action plans, they were developing their action plans. And so by the time they left their meeting, they weren't just talking about stuff, they were actually doing it. And they got done and it was a profound shift in the way that teachers valued the data that we were collecting and the methods that we were using, because they were finally got to the point where they're like, oh, this is useful time. I really used my time well. And now when I leave this meeting, then I already know we have a plan. We're moving forward. We're ready to go. So we had some really good things come out of it that way. So this was kind of the journey that we went on, and we continue along this journey. We continue to innovate. We continue to refine our assessments, internal and external. Like we just adopted a new math curriculum that we're going to be implementing next year. So of course, the things that we're already doing, they're going to change. That change will never end. So that means that my job will be secure. There'll always be work for me, which I'm happy about, and probably for most of you as well. So, but it is exciting times. So with that, any questions about that before I plug along? I know it's kind of a lot fast. If at any time, stop and ask if you feel you need to. So, okay, dashboards. And a lot of you are here because you want to either learn about dashboards, you want to know how to build dashboards, you want to get better at building dashboards, which is great. So, but why Data Studio? Well, I'm not sure how familiar you are with all of these, but there are and this is not an exhaustive list, but there are tons and tons of dashboards out there. Online software, web-based. One of probably the most well-known is in the bottom left-hand corner, the one with all the plus signs. That's called Tableau. That is kind of like the ultimate, the granddaddy of all dashboards. That software can do pretty much anything. Just shy of, if you're with the R with the circle on it, that's called RStudio. That's R. And that is a coding software, but just shy of that. Tableau can pretty much do anything, drag and drop. The downside to Tableau is that it's quite expensive. And so for schools and school districts, it's a hefty price tag. You can do a lot with like inside of Excel, inside of Sheets, of course. And if you can code and do Python, then go nuts. But we find that the reason why we have gone with Data Studio as a school is because we are a G Suite school, which I assume you are as well, and it already integrates with a lot of the things that we do. And so it's quite nice because we can pull from stuff that we're already using. It's not like a new thing necessarily. It's just a kind of like an add-on. And so that's one of the main reasons why we went with that. We can also create live dynamic data that we can connect to our student information system, so we can pull from a spreadsheet. We can also pull data from Drive and from calendars with scripts. There's also the ability to lock down dashboards with email addresses. So you can actually securely lock down a dashboard, and you can filter data depending on an email address. And so it does have those capabilities. And probably the biggest reason is because it's free. We don't have to pay for using it, right? It's a Google thing, so that's kind of a benefit of that. If you BigQuery, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. In between the spreadsheets and the CSV icon, there's a hexagon, a blue hexagon. It's called BigQuery. And BigQuery is kind of like a cloud-based database. And so if you're dealing with tons and tons of data, then that's something that you might look into. Like especially if you're looking at data over time, like you're looking at longevity, like how has this kid or this group, this cohort of students done from kindergarten through grade 12? When you're looking at all that kind of stuff, then BigQuery might be something to look into if you're not familiar with that. So let's go ahead and take a look at our data. So what I did was I took the information that you gave me in the form, and I have I've created a version of that for you to look at. So any of the anecdotal comments that you made, the last 3 questions that I asked about why you want to take this course, I've taken that stuff out, but I have some of the other things in it. So if you go into the classroom, under session 1 resources, you should be able to find these links to these files. So the one that we're going to be looking at, the actual data, is the form responses data. So that's the data. If you want to kind of grab that and just open that up. And then the other one is going to be a link to a couple of websites that you might use for a discussion that we're going to have in just a moment. So you should have the data that looks like this coming in, and it's got your responses, where you're from, your name, country, and your comfort level with spreadsheets and Data Studio. So I'm going to get back to that in just a second. What I wanted to show you, though, another thing that I'm going to try to do each session is give you some tips and tricks about something. And this, we're going to start out pretty mellow for the first couple of sessions, but then it does ramp up. So if you're finding that you're looking at this,
interrupt you, Chris?
Yes.
We don't see session 1 on Google Classroom. It's only session 0.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so let's see. Did I not? Okay. Oh, it doesn't come on till 7 o'clock. Well, you're gonna have to wait 4 minutes. No. Let me go ahead and sorry, let me get that published. My apologies on that. Let's see if it'll let me. I guess I talked faster than I thought I would. Thanks for pointing that out, though. All right, so those will come in, and we'll put those aside for a second. So I try to show some tips and tricks. Some, like I said, some might be based on your experience and what you filled out on the form. I'm going to assume that some of the stuff I'm going to show you at first is going to be, most of you probably know it, but we are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. So I'll just show you a couple of things that might be useful for you, or useful that you might find interesting to teach other people that you work with, or they might find useful. So this is a very simple thing that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with Data Studio right now, but something that I use often because I do a lot of presentations to teachers and to administrators with slides. And so I wanted to talk about how you can take data from a spreadsheet and dump it into a slide and have them all linked together. So you can update things kind of in the background automatically, because I work with a number of lovely people that love to copy and paste. And copying and pasting, it's great for some things, but sometimes there are more efficient ways to do things. So on the original spreadsheet that I asked you, the original form, these were all of the questions, and this is how the questions were asked. So we had timestamp and your name and how did you feel about things, where do you work, all that kind of stuff. And on the spreadsheet that you have access to, the headings are different. So the headings are like this. So what I did was I did a simple formula with called import range. And so are you guys familiar with import range? Anybody? Maybe? Yeah, some? Okay. So what import range does is, so just to give you a real quick thing. So we got the Google form. I connected it to a spreadsheet. And then what I did was I modified the headers. I just typed those in and use this formula called import range to bring data in from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet. So we can connect spreadsheets together using this formula called import range. And the way that this, so that goes into our new spreadsheet. And so the way that this works, this here is, it looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, but it'll make sense. If you haven't used it, it'll make sense, hopefully, the more you use it. Essentially, you type in this formula, import range, and then the first part here is the spreadsheet URL. So that whole address bar, when you're in there, you can just click and copy the whole thing if you want, or you can take just the spreadsheet key, which is after it says spreadsheet /d/, and then it's this all these numbers and letters before you get to the next slash. That's the spreadsheet key. You can just copy just that as well. And then you put in the spreadsheet URL in quotes, double quotes, put a comma, do another set of double quotes, and you put in the range of the information you want to pull. So whatever sheet it is and what the range is, and you put that in, and it will go ahead and pull that and link that together. So in the spreadsheet, up in the formula bar there, you can see that formula that's kind of going in. I try to put the colors on to make it a little bit clearer, but essentially that's what it is. When you do this for the first time, it'll ask you to allow access. So you just click on the button to say allow access, and it will go ahead and pull in all the data that you have decided you want to be pulled in. So it's kind of cool when you want to limit data coming in, or you want to connect things together and you don't want to copy and paste. You can go ahead and link sheets together that way. So another thing that you can do, though, is we can also link sheets to our slides when you're giving a presentation. If you got a chart, or you've got some information in a table or something like that, you can kind of link them together and get them to update automatically. So right down here, I've got the headers from the sheet that I've shared with you. And when if you want to update something, like if I go back in and if I come into this slide deck and I realize, like, oh, I spelled school wrong there. So if I come into my spreadsheet and I come up to here to school and I change that, when I go back to my form, it'll show me that has been, if I did it right, it'll show me that has been updated. So it'll give me this little update button here, and I can just go ahead and click on that and update, and then it'll update that for me. I don't have to recopy and paste and stuff. So those things are linked together. So anytime you if you link a spreadsheet to a slide and you want to update something in the spreadsheet, it'll show you in the slide that it's been, that you can update it. You don't have to copy and paste again. And if you happen to be like having a bunch of different things on different slides, when you go in, you just say link to spreadsheet to leave that live there. But say, for example, you have a bunch of different things, a bunch of tables that need to be updated. Up in the side, you can get this thing called linked objects. On that thing where I showed you where it said update, there's a drop-down menu. You click on that, and then it'll show you all the different things that are on your slide deck that are linked. And you can, if there are more than one, then it'll just say update all, and you can click that real quick, or you can update individual things. So, so this is something that I use fairly often with teams, and it's something that has saved people a lot of time. So maybe you'll find some use for it, or maybe you'll be able to pass it along to someone else. All right, so getting through that. So now let's go ahead and really look at our data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and I'm going to ask you, and these are going to be random this time. I know some of you are coming from the same school, so eventually I'll be putting you into breakout rooms with people from your organization. But for today, we'll just go random and just kind of get to know each other. I'll put you into some breakout rooms, and I want you to take a look at that data. And we're going to be building a dashboard right after this discussion. So I want you to think, if you're looking at that spreadsheet and you're going to make a dashboard, like what do you think we should know? What would be important to share in a dashboard based on that? Okay, it's going to be a very, very simple project. But I just want you to kind of have a quick conversation around those 2 points, and then think about, if you have time, maybe you think about, oh, how are we going to display it? What kind of a chart are we going to use to display that information? So any questions on that? We okay with that? Something that might also be helpful is the second resource that I put in there, the links for discussion. There are a link to 2 different documents. There are different types of charts, and what are different types of charts, and what would be ways to display data. So those are just 2 kind of cool resources that I use sometimes. You might find those useful right now in your discussion, perhaps. So let me go ahead and set up the breakout rooms. Totally random. I'm going to put, just give you a few more minutes so that you can have a chat with each other and introduce yourselves. I'm going to put about 14 minutes on. And let's see. Yeah, there are just a couple of you in each room. Mary Lou, I'm going to move you. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms. Timer's on there, and we'll come back in just a minute, or in a few minutes, sorry.
Chris, you brought us back early.
Hey, my apologies. You guys keep going. I was goofing around with something. My apologies. You guys keep on talking.
Can you remind us of the questions that we're supposed to be discussing? This is the perennial thing with like breakout rooms.
Okay.
So I always forget to screenshot them.
Sorry, I was trying to give you guys lots of time. Just like what data here is important? How would you display it? What do you think you would want people to be able to see from this?
Okay, we're going back to our room. Wait, can
No,
we
just stay here. I'm gonna
there? Okay.
give you. You got three minutes.
Okay, we'll pretend you're not there. There's not a whole lot of variation in this data set, but like potentially disaggregating by division too might be useful for instructional groupings or breakout rooms. Then we could just do, like a pie chart for that.
But I like what you mentioned about the roles and the comfort. We can disaggregate that 2 columns. Pretty.
And I don't think like for a visualization for this spreadsheet, I wouldn't do it, but plotting spreadsheet comfort versus data studio comfort and looking at the relationship in a scatter plot.
Something that I actually just find interesting about this data set itself, I know we're supposed to talk about how we would display it, things like that, but I'm looking at the data because that's just what I do. And I'm interested in the fact that I feel as though it's much more common to have sort of data days and data dashboard conversations at the elementary level than it is at the secondary level. And I see here that we have almost everybody's either all school or high school. And that's interesting to me.
One of the things we find, like at the high school level, the people who are interested in looking at data are the English teachers because we have reading scores, and the math teachers because we have math scores. But what do the performing arts teachers look at? What do the visual arts department look at? We've got a Chinese department. We don't have any standardized tests for them to take. So like there's no point in them going to our database.
But isn't there? Anyway.
Yeah. I fully agree with what you guys are saying there. Aaron, I had the same takeaway when I saw this. I was like, wait, what? Okay. Everybody's kind of from the same place. Fascinating. All right. So hopefully maybe, kind of threw you into the fire there a little bit. And I know sometimes it takes a little bit of time to kind of warm up and get to know each other and then start talking about things and maybe even time to notice things. But I just kind of thought like, okay, if you're looking at this data set and you had to share this with somebody else, what's important? What would you share? How would you share it? Or kind of the big ideas, because we're going to be doing that in just a moment. So is there anybody interested in maybe speaking up and sharing some thoughts that you had or you and your partner or small group had?
I'll jump in, I guess. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I just went right for it. What we looked at, and we thought it'd be interesting to look at people's roles, but noticing that data was, I was with Melissa in a pair. We were looking at the data was written in by hand, so that's obviously difficult to kind of chart if everyone, even if it might be the same kind of role, but they might have written it a little bit differently, it wouldn't match up. So then we started looking at the data that could be connected and put into kind of charts or kind of things. Obviously, the division of school would be interesting to see maybe in a pie chart or something. And then also looking at maybe if I don't know if Data Studio has like a map graph, but it'd be kind of interesting to see based in either country or country and city based on like either a map or something like that as well, to see where people are from and their backgrounds and things.
Excellent thoughts. Thanks. Gavin, what do you think?
Yeah, hi. I was with Jeff, and we were talking very much about what would the purpose of presenting that data be, and that would sort of dictate sort of how we would chart that, what we would group together. You know, I mean, we talked about the timestamp might not be very important, just looking at that data as it is, but it might be if you want to analyze the times that people submitted it on the form. So I think it depends on the purpose of the data and what you're trying to, what questions you're trying to answer of how you would present it and what is important and what is not important.
Absolutely. Very, very important knowing the context. We're going to talk about that a little bit next week too, understanding the context of your situation. Is there anybody else that would like to add on to that?
I was in a group with Erin, and she pointed out how if you're like designing this training, then the most actionable data is probably going to come from the comfort levels for a spreadsheet in Data Studio. When we talked about how we might do like a color-coded bar chart to visualize the distribution, we might be interested in the mean and median comfort levels for each of those. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, great points. Yeah, so if I look at that, I mean, this is kind of, I guess one way to look at it is for me, but I think it's also interesting. It could be for you as participants to know who else is in this group, right? So another cool thing about this is that you should be able to make connections with other people that are similar roles, similar situations, and hopefully build up your own personal learning network as well around data. So, all good points. Before we hop into Data Studio, any other last comments, questions, or things to add? Yeah, Carl?
Yeah, well, I just want to say that website, the resource you provided us, the data visualization catalog, it's very interesting, and I think potentially quite helpful in the near future.
Yeah, that's like a very cool kind of dictionary on data visualizations and just like how they're used and how they're used in the wild, and it's, yeah, I really like it. It's quite robust. Yes. All right. So what I want you to do, I know that based on this, we can see a lot of us are probably in the roles of where we can look at a spreadsheet and we can kind of start to analyze and start to pick things out and start to notice trends. And so from that, one thing that was interesting for me was I was very curious, how are the participants, you all, with spreadsheets, because that'll adjust how I teach, and what's your comfort level with Data Studio, because that'll adjust also what I introduce and how fast I go. So those were the two things that were really kind of important for me and where my eyes were drawn at first. What we're going to do, and I want you to kind of play along, and of course you can do your own version of this, but let's go ahead and get this connected to Data Studio and start seeing how we can visualize this. And I know some of you are probably what we're going to be doing now. It might be a little bit simplistic for you, but play along, and maybe you can advise us on some ways to do things if we get stuck. So I'm going to go into Data Studio, and I'm just going to start a blank report. So I click on that big plus sign there, or there's the create button up at the top. And if this is, we have a lot of ones, so I'm going to go through a little bit slower here. Whenever you're connecting data in Data Studio, before you can do a report, you need to connect a data source. So there are a variety of data sources that you can connect from. We typically use Google Sheets, but you might have like third-party assessment data coming from somewhere else, and you need to, and they give it to you in a CSV file, for example. So you can upload CSV files directly as well on this file upload. But these are the ones that we use most commonly. I'm going to go ahead and click on Google Sheets, and it will go ahead and give you a list of the spreadsheets that you most recently had open. So you should be able to find that one, the Data Studio for educators and school leaders. And when you click on that in the worksheet section, it'll give you a list of all of the tabs. And I did hide a tab, this mock data tab. So if you later wanted to go around and mess around with more data, I just added a bunch of random, it's all sample data. I just added some more stuff in just so that there would be more people. But I'm going to go ahead and click on the form responses one there. And there are some options here, like if you know that you have headers in the first row or not, if you have hidden columns and things filtered, if you want to include that or not. So I'm just going to leave those checked. I'm just going to click on add. And when you add in a data source to Data Studio, it'll automatically drop in a table. And just real quick, the layout of this on the right-hand side is kind of where you do the stuff. You have this data tab here that has these things called dimensions, and you have metrics. You have, as you scroll down, you can do different things, sorting and put on filters and those kinds of things. The available fields is where you'll be getting your data from. So these are essentially all of the columns that were in your spreadsheet. They're just kind of listed through here, and they list them in alphabetical order. There is one column in here that was not on the spreadsheet, and that's the record count. And Data Studio automatically adds in a record count. So there was a comment, I think Chad said, like, oh, it'd be cool if you had a map or something like that. And yes, well, it's Google, we're lucky we have maps. But in order to make a map work, let's think about that with our map data. In order to make a map show up, you have to have geographical data. Now, we know that in our data set, we have geographical data. We know we have countries, we have cities. But our data set over here doesn't actually show geographical data. So we can change the way the data is displayed. So I'm going to come up to country here. And notice how it's an ABC. And so that's showing us, it's showing up as a string value or a dimension, just words. But we want that to actually be different. And so what we can do is in our data source up here, and you can follow along on the pencil, we can edit the data source. So I'm going to click on that. And what this does is it brings up a menu of all of the fields that we brought in, and it says, well, what type of field is it? So you can come into here and actually change some of these if it matches correctly. And so we see a timestamp coming in as a date and time. You see comfort level coming in as a number, the other comfort level coming in as a number. That looks good. So I'm going to go up to country, and instead of being a text, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to change that to geo. And then I can decide, well, how do I want that displayed? Well, I want it displayed as a country. So I'm going to choose country. And it says, OK, you're changing this. So I'll say OK. And you'll notice that little globe pop up. So that means that it's recognized that there is some data in there that is geographical. So I'll click on done. And now I've got my globe here. And what I can do, you can come up to add a chart. And you'll notice that there are lots of different chart types here, like there are maps and stuff like that. You can also just take a metric and just drag it right on top. And Data Studio will guess what would be a good way to display that data. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But just like that, we can drop in a map, and you will see the different points for where we are represented, our cohort is represented. So that's just real quick. This happens to be a Google map. I tend to prefer let me find it, the GeoChart. So I'll come into here and just, if you didn't see me do that, right here at the top, right above our data, it has all the charts, and there's a drop-down menu. I click on that, and I can change my chart. I'm going to choose this GeoChart, and that gives us some like a heat map. So I'll pick that one. So we have that coming in, and we could also take a look at, if we wanted to, some more detailed information about countries if we want. If up here it gives us a table. A table is kind of a standard thing that brings in. And something that some people were saying was like, OK, let's take a look at where the roles that people have. So if you want to add data to this, it's just as simply as taking, I'm clicked on the table here, and I'm going to come over to roles, and I'm just going to drag that onto the dimension. And then it'll add that in for me. And you'll see that this gets kind of squished here. So you can resize it, of course. And you'll notice that there's this big gap here for record count, and this is kind of squished. So if you want to adjust those, if you right-click on the chart, you'll get a submenu. And there's this resize columns option. So you can either say fit to data, distribute evenly. So if I say fit to data, it'll kind of shift all those for me. I don't have to drag and move the columns around. That's just kind of a quick thing. So there we go. We've got our people. We've got their roles. You might want to put in maybe what division they work in. And I've also found this to be quite fascinating, is that a lot of us are either all school or high school. So I thought that was quite fascinating. We have one person in the middle school, but most of us are kind of coming from the same thing of being all school. I personally am more elementary school, although I do work with all school, but mainly in the elementary school. So there we go. What else might we want to drag in here? Or like, let's take a look at, if we're going to talk about the comfort level with Data Studio and spreadsheets, how might we display that? Any thoughts on that?
A scatter plot comparing one against the other, would that be useful?
A scatter plot. Let's see if we can do it. I don't use scatter plots so much, honestly.
One of the problems I've found with those when it's just 1 to 5 and you don't have a lot of variation with the data, sometimes the points will overlap. But yes, I had the same thought. Let's do it.
Let's drag it in and see what happens. Okay, so I've got that. So my X metric going across would be, what do we want to say? Like spreadsheet comfort level?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we want maybe our Y's going up and down, maybe our Data Studio comfort level. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I don't know if that's giving us what we want. It's sorting by the comfort level, which is fine. So we've got spreadsheets, we got people all the way up to 5s that are at a comfort of 2, even though their spreadsheet skills are at a 5, their Data Studio comfort is 2. Maybe that's what you want. You can also come in and change the bubble size. Is there, Matt, do you have, I don't do much with scatter plots. So do you have advice on how to make this better?
Yeah, I think Jeffrey was saying it. If you drag the record count on top to the bubble size, and then we can see like if there are a bunch of people who have a 1 at spreadsheet comfort and a 2. Okay. So
that's
there's a lot of overlap. There are a lot of people who have the same scores, I think, is what I'm getting out of this.
All right. If I was looking at this, I might take the Data Studio information and the comfort level for the spreadsheets and do a bar chart, do a stacked bar chart. So there are a few different types of charts in here. You've got your column chart and your bar charts. They also have this one that, even though it says line, it's actually a combo chart where you can add in multiple things. So if I pull in this this line chart here, excuse me, it's going to bring in countries automatically. Okay. And we can decide, well, let's change that maybe to our Data Studio comfort level. And then we can say like, maybe we'll change that to, let's change that to like by division, for example. And then we could say, what's our, so we have our spreadsheet comfort level, and then we have our Data Studio comfort level. So I don't know if that's bringing in what we need. We might need to make some adjustments to that. We could adjust our dimension a bit. And now we're getting like this kind of bar and this line thing. And maybe we want 2 bars instead. So you can adjust how your chart looks by coming into the Style menu. So over in Style, with your different series, you can decide, do you want them to be lines? Do you want them to be bars? So you can kind of get some stacks going on there. And then you can go through and you can be adjusting your colors and different things. You could decide that you would rather have it be horizontal instead of vertical. So you can come in and make some adjustments to that. This one happens to be a stacked bar here. If you just want a normal bar with side by side, you could do that. You can also, you see how this number is quite big here? It's like going up to 35 and stuff. Do you guys know why this is doing this? Like nobody scored, nobody put 35.
It's adding the sum of all of the scores rather than averaging.
Yeah, it's adding the sum. And so we can change that by, in the metric here, hover over sum, and you can change your metric. So I'm just going to choose average instead and choose average. And then there we get the averages. And then we can decide how we want those sorted, like maybe with, so this sort here, it's sorting it right now by our Data Studio Comfort. Okay, and it's sorting it by ascending or descending, apologies. We could sort it by ascending, for example, and say like, okay, Data Studio Comfort level of 1, but then their spreadsheet comfort level is a 3. Those are a couple of things we could do. Any other thoughts on something that we could do with that? Let me show you. I was just playing with this before we started, kind of goofing around a little bit. And so I dumped in the same data, and I just threw some stuff together. And I'll just kind of talk to you a little bit about what this is. And I think this answers some of the questions that you guys were talking about. So in here, I brought in what I found interesting was like where the people are coming from. So I put in a pie chart. I turned it into a donut chart, and I did this for the division, and this just made a pie chart of the division. But instead of having all of the like the numbers and stuff show up, I thought it gets kind of like the numbers are small in here and it overlaps and different things, especially with the donut or pie. So I thought, okay, I'm going to turn off all the labels and then just put in these things right here, which are called scorecards. And so I put in scorecards and then I display the information in scorecards. There's a little bit of complexity to this where you have to set up filters. And I can show you how to do that in just a second. This over here on the right side, this table, what I did was I brought in the table just similar as what we were doing, and then I added in the comfort level and the for the two categories, and I brought those in as metrics. When I brought those in as metrics, I could add on a heat map. So let me show you how we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this real quick. But inside of here, the record count, depending on what you're doing, like if you're counting the number of students in a grade level or in a division, that might be useful. But all of you are unique individuals, and you're also unique in Data Studio, so you only have one. So I'm just going to go down to metric here, and I'm actually going to delete the record count. So now we have the names, roles, divisions, great. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Data Studio Comfort, and I'm going to drag that onto a metric. And I'm going to go ahead and drag on the comfort level into a metric, the spreadsheet comfort level. And so it's starting to pull in your information there. Now, because I've pulled those into metrics, I can, in the style tab, I can change the way that they look. So if I come into style and I scroll down a bit, I have these metrics here. So I have metric column 1, which happens to be the comfort level, and column 2, which is a spreadsheet. So in here, it says number. If I click on that, I can either change this to a bar, so it'll put like a little spark line in there, or I can change it to a heat map, and it'll color code those for us, depending on frequency. So I can do the same with both of those. So that's kind of cool. A really quick way to put in a heat map. As long as you have metrics, as long as you have numbers, you can do that. If you wanted to color code, for example, like division, like you want to have all school be a color and you want high school to be a color, you can do that with something called conditional formatting. Very similar to a spreadsheet. You can do that in conditional formatting. And that can be done when you're on the chart. Right at the very top in your style menu, you have this option to add a rule for conditional formatting. So I'm not going to get into it now, but you could dive in. So that course that I shared with you, it goes in and shows you how to do all that. Or if it's something you really, really want to know, reach out to me and I'll walk you through it. But what I like to do, I like the heat maps because then if I go back to data and I go to my sort, right now it's sorting by names, but maybe I want to see like, okay, comfort level, who's feeling comfortable with Data Studio. So I might go into here and I can change this to sort primarily by the Data Studio comfort. And I'll say descending, so I'll put the high numbers at the top. And I can also have the option to put on a secondary sort. So I might come in here and say, okay, I want it to sort by the Data Studio, but then also by spreadsheet. And so then I can get an idea of who is kind of within our group, who feels comfortable, the most comfortable with spreadsheets and Data Studio, down to those that might be a bit newer to this. Right, so that's a quick and easy way to find like, oh, somebody in our group who might be able that we might be able to reach out to and ask for additional support on something. So that's something that I found to be kind of useful. I will, let's see, if we go back to that other one. So we have the map in there. I also thought it was kind of interesting to see. I went ahead and took the bar chart and with the comfort levels, and I sorted it by country. I just thought, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. See where people are from. You know, is there some correlation with where you're from and the comfort level? So back on this bar chart here, the way that I can change that, if I click on that, for my dimension, if I change this, if I click on it and I just change that to country, or I can just drag country into the dimension, either way is fine, and then I can see that there. And you can resize your chart to get your titles to come in and look nice and all that stuff. So that's just another thing to look at. One other thing real quick that might be helpful, and when we talk about interactivity with charts, the easiest way to do this is by adding in something called control filters. And there are a variety of different controls. So right up here where it says add a control, if you click down, you get this drop-down list, fixed size list, an input box, sliders, checkboxes. So depending on the type of data that you're bringing in, you might find these to be useful. The one that I find hands down to be the most useful is this drop-down list. So if you click on a drop-down list and think about like, oh, I want to set it up to filter teacher names. I want to set it up to filter by a student name, by a grade level, by something like that. This would be by far the most useful. So we bring that in, and then in this control field over here, you decide what do you want to filter by. So maybe we want to filter by country, for example. So if I put on country there, and I'll get rid of the metric, then what happens is when a user, or when I click on this, I can go ahead and select a country and say, okay, interesting. I wonder who's from the United Kingdom, and click on that. It'll filter it. And the cool thing is, if you notice, once I clicked on that filter applies to all the charts on the page. So now it's filtered down to Melissa here, who is in the UK. And we can see that she's in the UK, and we can see what her comfort level is like. You can also set this up to select multiple people. Maybe I want to see who's in the United Kingdom, the United States, and the UAE. Okay, those are the people that we have. So if you're thinking about, well, how can we apply this to our setting in schools? Maybe you need to select multiple grade levels. Maybe you need to select a small cohort of teachers. Maybe you need to select multiple divisions. You can do it that way. Whenever you're in and filtering something like that, there's this reset button up here. You can always just click on that and it'll reset all of your data. You can also have multiple controls. So you might have, like, for example, oftentimes we'll have like teacher and then student. And so the control filters will limit the information depending on what you choose. So if I chose, for example, United States only, that's going to give me two areas of information. Then when I go into preferred name, it's only going to give me two things to choose from now. It's already filtered that down. And then the next filter will only give me the choices of what and how you arrange that. Then you should be able to make use of those control filters. So this was not right now like this today, was just to kind of get you in, get you introduced, like how do you connect data? How do you start dumping some charts on there? How do you kind of get going with things? This is not meant to be like really pretty and fancy right now. We'll get there. But this is just to give you a quick start on how to do something. Before I move on, we've got about 15 minutes left. Are there any questions or anything people are curious about? Like I went too fast on something, or how do you do that? Or can you show us how to make that? Is there anything that kind of stands out that anybody is interested in seeing? Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Hi there. I just wondered where you put on your 2 filters. Can you do it where you only have a filter for one of the charts but not the others?
Yes, yes. So, yep, let me get rid of this. And what you can do, if you want to create you're talking about this control here, if you want to create a situation where you want this to only filter this chart, and you want this to remain the same, and you want this to remain the same, you can do that. What you would do for that is there are a couple of ways you can do this. One way is to group the filter with the chart. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my mouse button. I'm going to click and drag. So I'm highlighting the filter here and this chart. You can also hold down the shift key and click on all these things. And then once I've done that, I'm going to right click, or you can also go up to arrange here in the menu, and I'm going to group these together. So now when this is grouped, if I go up and select a country and I select the United States again, you'll notice this is the only chart that changes. These remain the same. So that's really helpful if you want to create a scenario where you're comparing a single class to a grade level, a cohort to a larger cohort, or a division, compared to the school, those types of things. So yes, you can go ahead and group those together. And you can group multiple charts together and leave other charts alone. You can totally do that. Another thing that can be done is by creating there are different levels of filters. So I won't go too deep into the woods on this. Let me ungroup this real quick. So this filter right here happens to be just for on this page, just for this. But if you wanted to, you could take this control filter, and you could, if you have multiple pages, you can set it up to be on every single page that you create. And so you do that by making that be a page filter. So let me see here. If you right click, you can make something called a report level filter. Yeah, so if I say make report level filter, it'll change to purple. And that means that if I add a new page, that filter is going to show up on every single page. And that filter now applies to every single chart on here, no matter what. So depending on what you want to do, like if you want to have a teacher and you have multiple pages, and a teacher goes in and selects a class, you don't want them to have to reselect their name every page they go to. You can set up a page level filter, and then that'll just keep their teacher name across all the pages in a report. So that's something that will be useful depending on how you're setting up your reports. Great question. Okay, Matt, yes.
Will Data Studio remember your filter settings? So if you set it to filter like United States, the next time you come back, or can you set it so that every time a user visits, by default, it's filtered to a value or set of values?
Yes, you can. Yes, it will not remember it unless you set it up. Great question. So this is something that I do when I'm sharing data with a group of teachers or something like that, and I don't want them to be able to see everything. I just want it to be almost blank, or only show the information that they need. So what you can do is if you click on the control filter, and this mainly only works with the drop-down controls. Right here under the control field where it says country, right below that it says default selection. So in there, you can type in what you want it to be. So maybe I want it to be United States. As long as it's an exact match, whenever this report is set up, it will, whenever they open it, it's going to be United States straight away. If you don't want it to be anything, I usually put in the word, you saw that pop up, like choose, for example. And I'll say like choose a student name or choose a teacher or something like that. So when you put in choose, the reason why it doesn't show any data is because the word choose is not in my data set. So I just pick a term or say select or something like that. And then that way the report starts out blank, and then that way they're not seeing anything that they don't need to see. They select and then by selecting the filter, then they have all the other options. They can go in and select all those options, and then it'll bring up everything for them. But yes, you set that default selection right there. Okay, great question.
But then you could only choose one value, right? Like if you want to choose the United States and Bahrain.
Yeah, no, you can, I think you can choose, you should be able to select multiple. So let's say, comma separated here, United States and Italy. We'll have those two countries pop up. So you could say grade 3 and grade 4, elementary school and middle school. You could do that. Okay, great questions. So going back to this one, other things that I did that I might bring up later. So here's the drop-down filter, same thing. This right down here is something called a pivot table. If you're doing a bunch of counts on things and you want to count values, then a pivot table will become helpful. The downside to a pivot table is that it just generates numbers only. You cannot bring in like text, like you can't bring in where the numbers are here, you can't bring in like a level, like an A level, B level, C level, or something like that. It just does counts. So, but depending on the type of data that you want to pull in, it might be useful. Like I set up this pivot table to show the countries and the different people in the divisions. And so we can see, for example, from Bahrain, there are 5 people that are all school. And in Indonesia, 3 of you are from the high school. So if that's something that we do as well. The other thing that I did up on this one here, these right here are called scorecards, and these are measuring KPIs or key performance indicators is typically what they measure, but you can use it to make a really cool count of things. So, and this will be the last thing I show, and then we'll wrap up. So what you can do, adding a chart, there's this one called a scorecard. If I just go ahead and select scorecard, you can get a count of anything that you want. So right now it's counting comfort level. It just happens to be summing up all of the numbers of comfort level. But maybe what I want to do is take a look at our divisions. So if I bring in division instead, by default, it's going to give me this CTD, which is count distinct. It's just counting all of the unique values. So I'm going to change that to account instead. And it brings up, okay, we have 18. Basically, we're saying we got 18 people in here. And so what we can do then is, if I wanted to look, and I know that in here I have like all school, high school, and I just want to bring in only the people that are all school, I can set up a filter on this. And you can set up filters on all of your charts, individual charts. So down at the bottom in the data, there's this filter section here. If I click on add a filter, it's going to ask me some stuff. So I might put this as I'm just going to say HS for high school, so I remember what that filter is. And then here I have options to include or exclude. So I'm going to say include, and then you say the field, which is your column in your spreadsheet. I'll say division. And then you have some conditions, and there are a variety of conditions. You might choose, the ones that I use the most often are either is null, which means there isn't a value there, contains, or equal to. So maybe I'll select equal to. And I have to type in the exact value here with capitals and all that stuff. So I'll just say high school. If I click on save, what it'll do is it'll just filter that down. Now there are 5 people that are in the high school. And then the other thing that I can do right now, it says division, and I want to know, well, that's high school. So what we can do is we can actually change the name that's displayed here, and it doesn't change the underlying data. If you click on a metric or a dimension with that edit pencil, just where we change the count, distinct, and the count, I can actually up here give it a new name. So maybe I'm just going to say this is high school. It will go ahead and change that on my scorecard for me. Pretty cool like that. So when you can take the same scorecard and then you can apply different filters to them. and get different data represented. So what I did with that was I just made this one, I copied it, and I just changed the filter to be like for all school instead, or something like that. And then you go into your style and you put on your colors and you make it look nice. But scorecards are really, really helpful when you want to show certain key metrics. They're great for quickly showing numbers of students in a grade level, or numbers of students that are EAL, or something like that. Okay, so we did that. We did a little bit of building. So just a quick review. Why are we using Data Studio? The main thing for us, and the reason why we use it, is that it's dynamic, it's collaborative. You can have multiple people on a report working at the same time, which you will experience in one of our sessions. For us, it integrates with our current Google ecosystem. We have control over everything. We don't need to outsource this to a third party and say, here's our data, can you build us something, and wait 2 weeks and get it back, and then it's already outdated. Like, we have control over it. We can adjust it to meet our needs. And of course, it's free. So before we totally finish up for the day, are there any outstanding questions or curiosities that people have? Chad, yes.
Just out of curiosity, I'm just thinking about this now, but do you have students use Data Studio? Is it something they use to, like, present something? Maybe they're working on a project and they could use it to present something, or is it something that you just generally use as admin staff kind of thing?
So currently I would say heavy into the admin side, but I have taught middle school classes and high school classes around using Data Studio. Mainly around projects. Like, for example, the most recent one I did was, there was a high school class that was working on a project of like building their travel bucket list. And so they had to pick places that they wanted to go, how much it was going to cost, how much was airplanes, hotels, what, spending cash. And so they used Data Studio to represent all of that data that they collected. So middle school, a little bit simpler, but yeah, they're given a data set, and then they use Data Studio to do some simple visualizations. So I would say high school, absolutely. Middle school, if you've got some switched on kids, then yeah, probably. Yeah, Matt.
What tools are you guys using for, like, cleaning and prepping data?
Cleaning and prepping data. So I have a tool called I'm lucky enough to work with a data scientist who is the tool that he's a great guy. He helps us with a lot of our data. We mainly do it in spreadsheets, though. Cleaning it and prepping is a lot in spreadsheets, and then we upload to either BigQuery. But we just try to establish a few key things, like making sure we have a primary key in all of our sources, making sure that the data comes in as close to as much as possible, like what is in our student information system. And then whenever we make templates, whenever we make other things, we make sure that is consistent. So, but a student ID number is the most important thing for us to make sure that we keep in mind when we're prepping our data. Carl?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, at this point, and even after the end of this class, how do you advise us working with that course that you offered everyone for free? Like, is it basically going to be a review of everything we're doing here, or?
No, it won't be a review. It's a self-paced course. That's actually, ironically, that course I had planned to launch that course on February 1st, before I knew I was doing this. And so they almost happened kind of simultaneously, and it just kind of worked out that they are similar in nature. The other course is a self-paced course that will walk you through and hold your hand through a lot of the stuff. We will not cover all of that. We'll touch on some of it. So I would advise you, if you're new to Data Studio, to do see if you can find some time to do that. I'll give you some advice through the through Google Classroom, like, hey, maybe you want to work on these sections if you got time. I'll give you some advice along the way, but yeah, it's gonna, if you go through that course, you're gonna be pretty well prepared to make whatever you need to make in Data Studio later on. All right. Okay, so we're just about done. Inside of session 1, there's a homework, a couple of things. One of them is optional. That's the Data Studio course. Totally up to you if you want to do that or not. There's another section, another homework piece that I've put in there. If you can do that, I believe that is the one about adding in some charts. I know some of you have added in a chart, and so if you haven't done that, maybe do that. We will be looking at those next week. And then the exit ticket, I would really appreciate if you could take a few moments to fill in the exit ticket. The exit ticket will be the same every week. You don't feel obligated to do it, but if there's something that that you think would be good for me to know moving forward as far as how these sessions are going, I want to make sure that you are getting the most out of this and that this is set up for you. So please feel very, you're very welcome to be candid and just be a straight shooter if you need to, or tell me what you liked about it and what you think is going well, what you would like to know more about. But I will adjust the course based on your responses and your needs. Okay. The next session, it will be same time next Wednesday, April 20th. And so I look forward to continuing that conversation. And in the meantime, do reach out if you have any questions or you want to know anything. More than happy to chat. Doesn't have to be just in this time frame. Okay. So thank you. And with that, we will see you next week.
Thank you, Chris.